Progressive Business Conferences would like to welcome you to today's program, Copywriting Workshop, Improve SEO, Boost Conversions, and Measure Success. My name is Krista, and I will be your conference moderator for today's program. Today's webinar is 90 minutes in length. This 75-minute presentation will include a 15-minute interactive question and answer session. The entire program is being recorded and can be purchased by using the order form included with the conference materials. Please listen to this important instruction as it will help to ensure the best possible experience during the program. If you should have any technical problems, please call Progressive Business Conferences at 800-964-6033, and a representative will assist you. We cannot help unless you alert us to the problem. Please remember that it is a violation of our copyright to record the conference. Now I would like to introduce your speaker, Tina Arnoldi. Ms. Arnoldi?
Thank you, Krista, and welcome everyone. We'll jump right into our copywriting workshop, which is really all about the internet, information that you put out there on the internet, whether it's through your website or blogs, and we'll cover a number of different things today. I am going to do some open-ended questions with you. I'd love to get some feedback, get some of your responses as I ask these questions. I want you to know straight ahead that there's no right or wrong answers. Just if you put those in, you won't be able to see those when you enter them in the Q&A box, but I'll read off some of the responses. So again, this is my information up here. You can always find me Twitter, YouTube, SlideShare. I'm not hard to find online. So I'm going to start off with a comic today. I think those of you who are marketers are definitely going to appreciate that. So this one is the 7 Deadly Sins of Marketing, and it gives something that marketers do wrong for each one of these. And I love this first one, sloth. It says, whatever we did last year, right? How easy is that to just get back into whatever you did the previous year? And envy, I also thought was great, is whatever our competitor is doing. That's how a lot of people are making their decisions with their marketing. So as we start getting into what is, content, I want to get your opinions first. So it sounds like a simple question, but if you just take a minute in the Q&A box, just tell me what you think of when you hear content. Again, it's not a right or wrong answer, but I'll read off a couple of responses and then we'll keep moving along. So we'll just take just a minute. So, yep, anything that's online. That's great. What are some other? Anybody have any other ideas for content? Again, I'm not going to read off your name, and there's no right or wrong answer. Okay, messaging, right, being found on different sites, your own website, absolutely, that's content. Okay, that's great. Now, thank you for everybody for putting your questions in there or your comments in there. So here's one slide. There's more than this, but these are just different ways to think about content. I think for a lot of people when they think about content, the first thing that can come to mind is their blog. We need to put something out on our blog. You can have videos, images. Interviews can be interesting because not only are you get the opportunity to learn something or to connect with an expert in your field, but a lot of times the person who's being interviewed, and when that information is put out, your interviewee is also going to share that content. So that can be a real advantage. Quizzes are just getting people engaged, and then maybe that's some data you can use just in general, learning about interests. Some obvious ones, the presentations, ebooks, white papers, and then these last two I want to comment on. I found one site recently, went to a marketing conference that I did not attend, but I knew it had some really good material, and they had some summaries on the different sessions that they attended. So I thought that was kind of neat for that type of content to go out. And then the scenario calculator. Like a quiz, that too is very interactive. So you can have a calculator where people are estimating how much money something would cost, or a mortgage rate or interest rate. So again, you're giving them a piece of information on your site that starts to get them engaged. So why would you bother, right? So what is this with the cop? Why are we writing things? Why are we even concerned about what we put out there? Well, there's a lot of advantages. Of course, more traffic. I'm going to talk a little bit about SEO today with our traffic and our ranking. You want people to come to your site. You're generating leads. You're maybe providing service. So there's a number of different ways you can think about why you're doing this. If you think, okay, we're increasing site traffic, awareness, downloads, we're educating people. We want them to be educated on our industry, but also on our specific products. So there's a lot of ways to think about how you're going to do your content. This definition is just great. This is Content Marketing Institute. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you. I definitely recommend bookmarking that site. So it's a strategic marketing approach. It's not something that we should just be throwing out there. And valuable, relevant, and consistent. Those kind of the three words to point out. The relevant is, relevant to what's happening in your space, relevant for your customers. And then consistent is a real hard one. When, a lot of people are doing their copywriting when they have maybe 5 other things they need to do with their job. So to stick on a schedule can be a challenge, but that is important, because you're attracting and retaining your audience. So it's one thing to get them there, but what are you doing, to keep them there? So from there, let's go ahead and let me talk a little bit about SEO. Now, this isn't an SEO webinar today, but since we are talking about content and writing, SEO is important for what you're doing, what you're putting out online. So I'm going to just highlight a couple things briefly before we keep going. So now you may have heard of these two, the Panda update, Penguin update. There's all these different algorithms with Google. So let me just highlight what these mean. So Panda was focused on sites, that had too much advertising, or just really didn't have a good navigation. So kind of like the user experience wasn't good. So it's looking more for sites that have more in-depth content, that's regularly updated, so that's just really what kind of that Panda update was about. I kind of say this is Google's way of kind of catching up to us when we're doing something we're not supposed to be doing. The Penguin update was a big one when it came to links. So are you building quality links to your site, or are you buying links? And you think, well, what does this have to do with writing? This is just kind of a general as far as what you're putting on your site. So again, think about that and how you're promoting someone else or someone else is promoting you. You want your content to be found, so it's great if you have links to your content, but be very careful about the manipulative link building that people still do. You might have a marketer say to you, well, I can get you 100 first page links or PR 8, so they're trying to say we can get high ranking links for you, and that's not necessarily the case. The other thing Penguin addresses is those comment spam links. So again, this is people trying to get others to read their content. So they go to a blog, they make a comment and say, hey, this is the best thing ever, and then they're sending somebody to a link that's totally irrelevant. So of course, that's not a good way to get your content promoted. We'll talk about some ways to do that, but that's definitely not it, the buying links or manipulating links. The other one I just want to comment on is Hummingbird. And this one I think is really one of the most relevant ones for content writers, because it's really paying attention to each word in a user query. So they want to make sure that the whole query somebody types in, whether it's a sentence or conversation or meaning, is being taken into account and not just keyword stuffing. So if you're using a bunch of keywords because you think it's going to get people to your site and the keywords don't flow naturally, that's just not going to work. So Hummingbird is really about the meaning. So that's why when you're doing your writing, you need to make sure that it flows well. We'll talk about some tips for that, and that you're not just trying to rank for a word. It's really, so Hummingbird is really about the meaning of those words. Okay, so we know that keywords, what's a keyword about? What does that mean? So the keyword, I think this chart is a nice way to think about how you might want to rank for a keyword. So you have your keyword phrase. This is the keyword that you really want to win. So that's your target keyword. And then, so let's say your keyword phrase is something with accounting. So a keyword variant might be financial services. So it's in the same family, talking about finances and managing your money. And then you have related words. Maybe that could be estate planning, and I'm kind of mixing these up a little bit. Just want you to get the point that when you think about your keywords, not everybody's going to rank number one for attorney or accountant or restaurant. So it's okay to think with what you want to start with, but then start to think about the different variations of it. So you're, more realistically going to get the kind of traffic that you want for the keywords that are important to you. So let's talk next about keyword discovery. So, okay, so you're thinking about keywords. So how do you even find which keywords that you want to use? I'm going to show you a couple tools here, but let me walk you through this first. So you can test some of them with paid search. So whether you're, using the Google Keyword Planner, which is part of AdWords, you can see, you can start to get bids on seeing which words are competitive or used. But also, if you have a little bit of a budget to put into paid advertising, you can try different variations of your keywords and see which ones get the most response. So you want to make it about what you're doing. You don't want to manipulate it, but think about the keywords that are relevant to the content on your site and test that with paid search a little bit. The other one, I'm going to show you a screenshot of checking SEO in Google Analytics. If you've been on a Google Analytics webinar before, you may know that the keywords are, I guess maybe a couple years ago it switched to not provided, where you don't have, you can't see the keywords like you used to be able to see them. So instead, you can do them through the Webmaster Tools. And I just have one slide to show you on that just to make sure. Again, to think narrow. So are you attorney? Do you practice family law? Do you practice, again, just whatever your area is. That's what this long tail is. When you read or hear that term, it's about being more specific with what you're doing and not trying to rank for a word such as restaurant. And then again, the Google Keyword Planner. If you have an AdWords account, you're already familiar with this. If you don't have an AdWords account and you want to use the Keyword Planner, you used to be able to get to it without logging in, but you can set up an AdWords account and technically not even really run any ads and be able to use the Keyword Planner a bit. So that's a way you can kind of still make use of this tool even if you're not running ads. So just quickly, I want to show you this search engine screen for those of you who are not very familiar with analytics. This is the only slide I have on this, but if you look at the screen I have up here, and you picture your Google Analytics account, on the left column you'll see acquisition, search engine optimization, and then queries. So what this can tell you, once you click Google Analytics with what used to be called Webmaster Tools and is now called the Search Console, the information you're getting in your analytics account is the query is the actual search term somebody typed into google.com. The impressions are how many times that showed up in a Google search result, and then clicks are the number of times they clicked on your specific result in the search query. So this helps you see what kind of information people are looking for and when your site pops up. I will note this is a screenshot from my account from a while ago, and what's interesting is this number 3. It says people wanting to be on Twitter without having an account. This is a post that I did years ago, and I find that I still get traffic just for that, and quite a bit. So I think, well, you know what? Maybe the next time I do a post, I might want to consider, a new one on Twitter because I see that people are interested in that topic, and they're getting to my website when they search for it. So again, if you just make a note, if you're not familiar with this, just put down Webmaster Tools and take a look at that later and make sure you connect that to analytics so you can get some of this keyword data. And the next thing is just a screenshot of the Keyword Planner. So if you were in your Google Analytics account, you could search for new keyword and ad group ideas. So what's neat about this is you're able to see just a volume of keywords, so you know if you're going too broad, that your word is so broad that it's going to be trouble for you to rank for, or if it's too narrow that very few people are looking for your term. So this is another way that it can help you with the keywords. You can also just kind of brainstorm. If you're stuck, even if you just put in something as generic as restaurant, it'll still give you some suggestions for related words that you might want to use. So you can go ahead and give that a try, and that'll help you find some more of your keywords. The other thing I want to do is I just want to show you a couple free tools, and this I'm going to just take a minute. I should say free with a caveat, to have you can see some sample data, and of course they want you to start and open an account. But I just want to show you how this works. If this will come up a minute here. So keyword discovery. I will say I'll just do financial services. Okay. And so you will, you can get a trial, and even without it, you can see some words that at least get you thinking. So let me tell you what I would look at here. So I use this tool, I said financial services, and I can see how much it's searched, and I can see some other terms that people associate with it. So if you say, I don't know, creative or sales, or, some of these terms, I'm not sure how they would be related, but it can at least get you to start thinking about those words. If you just have the one word and you just can't think of, what else that you might want to include, what else that word could work with. So let me show you another one a minute here. So that one is keyword discovery. And again, you can get some free data there. This one, word tracker, I'll go very vague. We'll say internet marketing. And again, you'll see I just came in. I'm not logged in. I'm just kind of experimenting the tool. And then this, again, you can start to see the volume. So, you could see, so internet marketing, if I wanted to write about, let's say, the training offered by our company, maybe I would want to make sure I include the word training, the word online. So again, you can see it's limited information, but it'll help you work through your keywords. And let's just go through one more. This one, SEM Rush. This is another nice one because it will let you see some of your, give you an idea of what kind of competitive data is out there too. So I'll go ahead and do one for restaurants, vegan restaurants. So this tool is one, and then let me just say too, I have no affiliation with any of these tools. So if you do a paid plan, of course, I don't get anything from it. But what this is going to do, again, it's going to give you some different terms that may be related to what people are searching for and the kind of thing that you would put on your site. So it is going to note for paid search, but you'll see here too, it's also going to show you the organic results. So you can see if you're ranking or what your chances are of ranking, and it's just another way to kind of help you think through, how can I find some of these keywords, is to just try. And again, if you do a paid account, that might help you, but just see what you can get with some of this demo to help you think about your keywords. So now that, assuming you have some of your words picked out, I'm going to step back to SEO for just a minute, because once you know what those words are, you want to make sure you're incorporating it not just in your content, but also in the kind of technical SEO aspects of the site. So I want to point out here on the top left, it says, does the title match what searchers want? So this is great if your title this is obviously pretty specific, Andromeda Galaxy. So if you have a keyword that you want to go after, you think is a reasonable one, and you can incorporate it into your title, that's ideal, because this is what shows up in Google search results. So if they see that keyword there, they know that your result is probably going to be relevant. So that's where we're coming back to this SEO, is once we're talking about the keywords. And again, when I talk about consistent content, if you look at the box at the middle bottom, it says, is your result fresh? So we can see in this example, it was something from May of 2015. So again, depending on your industry, how often things change, that's going to affect whether or not a searcher is going to look at that too. So that's why the consistent content is important. So this is where we come back to the SEO a little bit. And then before we start getting into the specifics about content, I just want to show you one other slide here. And this one is about, something you'll hear a lot when it comes to copywriting and putting content out there is they'll say, well, should I write for search engines or should I write for people? And the answer is that you should write for both. So with engines, we're talking about, obviously the keyword targeting, that Google sees that it's quality content based on those algorithms we talked about earlier. If a lot of people are clicking through, they indicate that your content is relevant. It's filling a need for content, that they're able to get what they need. So the easiest answer is really, when you do your copywriting, you want to write for the search engine and you want to write for people. Okay, so let's start talking about how you are defining what your content should look like. Quite simply, I say your content won't look like my content. If we're in different industries, or if we have, different markets, it's going to depend on, what your business is about as far as what's going to be appropriate for you. So a good place to start is with this this mission statement. Just sounds very simple, but because everyone, go to work every day and you assume you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, you may not stop to think about this question. So if you can think through audience, topic, and their problem, so we are a resource for, I'll say, new college graduates who are interested in finding a career in their major and want to work in the Southeast, right? So this is just off the cuff. I'm making that up, but you can see. So I'm talking about who my audience is. There's some kind of topic, something that they're interested in, and they want to solve a problem, right? So you remember, they're not interested in what you offer. They want to know and how you're going to solve their problem. And I'm just curious, my next question, again, obviously there's no wrong answer here, but just so I can get an idea on who's on the call, if some people in the Q&A box, if you would just type in who your audience is. I'm just curious about the diversity that we have on the call today. Oh, meeting planners. Okay, that's a good one. Very specific. Visitors to the region, college admins, diabetics, senior 65 plus. Let's see a couple more. Architects, public entities, pen lovers. That's great. Everyone likes to get a free pen at an event too, so that's a good one. Brokers. Okay, great. So we've got quite a range. Okay, so it sounds too that you know who your audience is, and not everyone knows that. They're not able to identify that quickly. But now that we've talked about, you've identified who they are, you've given me the broad category. The reason I ask you that is because the next step is to write to one. So this can be hard to do, but it really forces you to narrow down your content. So, who your customer is, what they worry about, what are their needs. So for someone here who's saying that their audience was people who have diabetes. Okay, so someone who has diabetes, that's a start. Were they recently diagnosed? Maybe they don't have diabetes, they're caring for a family member who did. So, you can see different ways you think about. They worry about taking their medication, cost of medication, access to medication, and then needs and wants. And again, back to what they need, what they want, and it gets you thinking about what you can do for them rather than just, hey, this is what we offer. So that's why I tell people, think about who your audience is so you can identify who your writing is for. So the consumer journey. This is going to look a little different for everyone, but when you're writing for your one person or your audience, they are going to be in different stages. So before I talk about kind of the logistics and planning and kind of getting started with your content, I just want you to think of these stages. Now, if you search online for the consumer journey or prospect journey, you're going to see something a little bit different on every site that you hit on. So this is no magic formula. What I'm doing is I just want you to walk through that there's a place for different types of content. So people are interested maybe in what you have to offer. So they're interested in, architecture. I think I saw a couple people said that. So they're doing their work, they're learning what's out there, and maybe at some point going back and forth to different sites, they make it back to yours and they're starting to consider what you offer. So they're at the consideration stage, they're spending a little more time on your site, and people are so reluctant to give their email addresses, they're maybe deciding if they really do want to give that information to you. And then maybe at that point, that's where they're completing a micro action. And a micro action would be if they enter that email to get the white paper, or maybe if it is an architect, they'll have a video of work, that was done for a home or something. So this micro action isn't when you're selling yourself so much. It's more of when you're just trying to get them to be a little more engaged with you. So then, so they've gotten, let's say, they've got the white paper. So now they're evaluating it. My interactions with this company so far, this piece of material they put out, is this helpful to me? Does this give me new information? And then they're getting ready to make a decision. So they may say, this is definitely the vendor for me, this is not. And then they may give feedback about, why they went with you or didn't go with you. Excuse me a minute. Sorry about that. So again, the consumer journey, just know that there is a journey that they're going through. And the type of content is going to vary based on where they are. So let me talk about the kind of the getting started and some of the logistics in planning. So the first one I had when I had you think about your mission statement, the audience, topic, and the problem, this is where you're defining the purpose. You get back to that statement. If you complete that, that'll help you out. The reason you have to think about your purpose is so you don't get, now remember one of the cartoon at the very beginning when it's saying because our competitors are doing it? Well, now, yes, because your competitors are doing it, it indicates you do need to maybe be aware, but that can't be enough of a reason. Or I've heard other people say, because Instagram is a popular channel right now. Well, the purpose needs to be more than that, and it should start with a focus on your company and the company message and what your differentiator is. Okay, so that's kind of that defining purpose. The next one is understanding your audience. So there's a more specific term when you're talking about customer personas. So when we talked, I asked who your audience was and try to identify as one. Your audience, you're identifying them, but you're also looking at where they are in the purchasing funnel. So like the example I gave of the journey, somebody who's kind of just at the beginning, they're just kind of considering, they might want to see a table of benefits and features for your service and product. So they want to see why they would even want to consider what you have to offer. The people who made a decision and have decided to go with you, they might benefit from content in the form of a YouTube video. So what you're doing is you're creating a video clip to show them how to use their content. So you see you have different types of content at different channels. Next is telling your story. No one cares about your corporate history unless you have an inspirational story, right? So kind of those basic, kind of that dry history isn't really the right way to go. Now, if you have a story that is inspirational, naturally, you want to share that. The next one, choosing your channels. Again, you want to make sure your channel fits with your audience. So if your demographic, so some people said is 55 plus, and there's a channel out there, whether that's social media or email or blogs or whatever the channels you're considering, and the audience on those channels, the demographics show that it's under 30. Obviously, that's not a channel that you want to consider. Recent and relevant, that's the one I said you've got to, make sure that you're posting on there regularly. And then knowing your resources. So do you have enough people on staff to manage this for you? Can you really sustain a new video each week? So that's what you want to think about when you're writing your content. You've thought about each of these points. So the hard part for people sometimes is coming up with ideas. So if you would, just tell me where you get some ideas for your content. For those of you who are copywriters, you're putting content out there, just take a minute and tell me some of the places you go for ideas. I'd love to see what you have here, and I'll read off a couple before we continue on. Google Alerts, that's a great one. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, Google Alerts, absolutely, you want to set those up on maybe your company name or your topic. Social media posts, that's another one. You see what people are talking about. Since somebody mentioned social media posts, one thing that's helpful is a tool called Social Mention, and you can see where people kind of user-generated content across channels. Yeah, conventions. Oh, that's a good one. So we talk so much about this online world that it's easy to forget that there is an offline world too. So conventions, that's a great one too, whether, in-person events. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing those. Those are some good ones. So let me give you a few other ideas for the idea pipeline. Actually, I'm sorry, the generating ideas, and then we get to the pipeline. So the generating ideas is very simple, but what questions do people ask you? And I know that just sounds very, very simple, but it is a place to start. And that is what I did. I will occasionally do some short tutorials on YouTube. It's like a 2-minute, low production kind of thing, and it's based on the questions I get asked a lot. That way I'm not starting my explanation over, every time I hear that question for the first time. So just kind of thinking about what are the questions that you're getting asked. If you're not sure, maybe this is something just to tell your team, say, you know what, we need to do some more writing for our site. We need to develop more content. I don't know where to start. Can everyone just jot down what they're asked for the next week? And that could be a way to start. With Google Analytics, you can do site search. So if you have an option on your site where people can type in what they're looking for, then you can see in site search, you can see the words that they typed. So this tells you once they came on your site, what are the things that they searched for, that maybe they weren't able to find right away. And then, of course, your conversion funnel. Let me explain what this means. So in Google Analytics, if you follow the path that people are going to, check, they're looking at something, they're considering it, and then, everybody drops off maybe when they get to the page, or a lot of people drop off when they get to the page about pricing. So you see a lot of people, they don't finish the whole path. Maybe they even create a username and password and they're entering information, and then they get to pricing and they drop out. What that tells you is that maybe you need to do a better sales pitch on why your product or service costs a little bit more. So that's an idea for content. People are dropping off, so there might be something, additional information we can share with them. So now the idea pipeline. This is when you're scrambling, you're thinking, we don't know how to develop content. So I'm glad somebody did already mention Google Alerts, so that was great. You can do a Google Alert on your business or your trend. Follow RSS feeds. That can be a little hard to keep up with information out there if you're subscribing to 100 different e-newsletters. But if you're not familiar with an RSS feed, it's just a way for you to scan, makes it kind of easy for you to scan content. Another option is using LinkedIn. So if you join some groups in LinkedIn in your industry, you can do a little lurking, see what people are talking about. That can help you with some ideas. Your email subscribers. Now what I want to point out here is when somebody subscribes to your email, they have the option of just possibly saying just their email address. But if you can get a little more information from them, are you male, female, age group, location, what's your primary interest, or if you can get people that are willing to build up their profiles a little bit, that can be some information that you might be able to use as you're creating content. Searching YouTube, and a lot of people are not aware of this, but YouTube is the second most popular search engine, and videos are becoming more and more important, so you could maybe just do a search on some videos that seem to be popular that can help you with some ideas. And then, of course, the alerts, and then Google Trends. So there's a lot of different ways that you can start bringing in ideas, and not all of these are going to work for you, and it doesn't mean you should do all of them, but hopefully these are some ways that are at least going to help you get started. An editorial calendar, so you've defined your purpose and your mission, and you're starting to get some ideas, and we're going to look at a couple ideas, a couple sites that are doing this well. But an editorial calendar, sometimes I think that scares people off because it sounds very complicated, and it doesn't have to be. It could be as simple as a spreadsheet where maybe you are planning ahead for the month. You have the date when you're planning to put content out. Your channels, you know where your demographics are, where the 50 plus are and the under 20 are, or, so you're starting to figure out where that's going to go, or if it's going to be maybe just blog only content. So there's a lot of chances there, different opportunities for where you can put your content. And then the focus. So you've identified, hopefully, a couple keywords that you want to use. You know what you want to talk about. And it can help to look at that ahead of time, rather, so you're not sitting there every day thinking, what am I going to write about? If you've done some of that keyword research and you know some words that you want to target in your copywriter, it's going to make it a little bit easier for you to plan out your content. Action step. This is great to include really in every piece that you do, because you are writing content because you want customers. Now, unless maybe your content is just purely driven by advertising revenue, you're going to want people to do something like fill out that lead generation form. So as they read your content or view your video or read your email newsletter, what are they going to do next? Are they going to download the white paper? Are they going to sign up for your in-person seminar? So think ahead about what you want them to do with the content that they're absorbing. And then, of course, metrics. And I'm going to talk about that at the end, because you want to measure what you're doing so you're not just, blindly putting information out there and you're not getting any return. Okay, so we're kind of laying the groundwork and getting those keywords. And then it's what works well? What really stands out with content? And again, not all of these are going to be appropriate for your business necessarily, but the human interest stories, if you can find a way to tell a story about your brand, and I'm coming back to the one who said they work with people who have diabetes. I mean, that's a real personal thing that somebody's struggling with, and to get the resources or get the help they need, if people are willing to share their stories, that's interesting, and that's going to get people's attention. The frequent posting, part of the problem when I talked about those Google algorithms at the beginning is people are just putting stuff out there just to be seen. And so the quality starts to go down. So I say frequent posting, but it needs to be frequent quality posting. Every time you put some content out there, you're reminding people you're there, you're reminding the search engines you're there, so you have to do it commonly. The next one, curation. This is when you're pulling other people's content. So you'll see this with BuzzFeed. I'll show you another site here in a minute, is they are pulling information from other people and kind of reusing it on their site. The headlines are real. This is really the core of what your piece of content is you want to make sure that it's a headline that's going to say, people are going to say, wow, I want to click on that. And maybe if you can, try to incorporate your keywords into your headline, because that's just another indicator of what people are going to find when they read your content. Being social. So if you do have social media channels, to use your content out there. The other thing is kind of a historical one. So if you look in your Google Analytics, and I know there I am talking about analytics again, is you can look at the pages that are visited, or if you have a directory just for your blog, or if you're tracking when somebody clicks from your email, so whatever ways that you're using to send people the content, kind of take a look at the type and time. Like, okay, so we don't have anybody clicking on that link in our video to come to the site, but we're getting a lot of referrals from our email newsletter, and our email newsletter talked about this specific topic. So this can be an indicator of what's worked in the past if you're not sure what to work on next. So this next one, I will point out, this is an article I did. And if anybody, so now a couple people are thinking, wow, isn't she arrogant showing us the right way to do things? That's not it at all. There's a reason I'm showing this to you. So I mostly do my freelance writing. Obviously, most of it is in the marketing business space. And I just kind of on a whim decided to try another piece on another website. So my headline is pretty provocative, or 10-year-olds too young to marry, and hopefully we would all answer that the same way. But the point is, the views went to over 700 in one night. Now, I know for popular bloggers that's not going to be a big deal, but for me that is not something I see. So that's why I can share that with you, as I was kind of stepping out of the norm. So it's human interest. The headline got people's attention, and for me, I'm obviously not selling anything as a result of doing that, but it's just good to know, partially for my writing portfolio, and just to point out that, human interest stories and provocative stories can get people to click. If we looked at some of my other postings, I'm sure the readership is maybe 4 or 5, so I don't win every time. I was just kind of surprised to see this. So I'll give you some examples of the curation. So I said curation, this is where you're using other people's content. So you are organizing it. So maybe it's going to be the top 5 websites for nonfiction book releases or something. So you're organizing all the different things that are out there. You're summarizing it. So someone has a long piece and maybe you're pulling a couple highlights out of there, and that's how you're going to curate the content. And then the other one is editorializing. So you're agreeing or disagreeing maybe for a reason, adding some extra comments to it. So I want to try another question before I show you the sites I have in mind. Can anyone give me some good examples of sites that do that curate the content? So they may still be putting some original content out there, but there's ones that, that you see them pulling other people's content. Yep, BuzzFeed, and that was the one that I was going to say too. That's a very popular one for using other people's content. Anyone else have an example of something, a site where content is curated? Okay, yep, and then I see Huffington Post, and that was actually my next one. So the Huffington Post, they do a great job. They aggregate content from other sites, so they're getting a lot, they're putting a lot out there. Oh, and I'm sorry, I just see someone else put Gawker up here. That's a good one too. So, they're getting content from other sites. Another strategy is they're inviting popular bloggers to guest post, right? And that's a win for them because they get their Huffington Post readers, but then they also have these popular bloggers that might be driving traffic. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know any popular bloggers to guest post, if you know someone that's relatively well respected in the field or has a story to tell, that's okay. It doesn't mean you have to have somebody with 5 million followers guest post. It kind of helps you to get some fresh perspective. Of course, the amount of content, so they're just posting constantly, and then watching those trends. So whether it's Google Trends or alerts, this is where you can see what people are talking about and what they're interested in. So you want this to be a natural fit with your content, but this is still, they have an interesting model for curation. And this is just one example. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but this is just their Christianity section. So they can see you've got something on religion, and then they've got sections for each religion and the section just for this, and they have this content with some of these interesting headlines that'll get you to click. So I think they're a good site to look at for somebody who's curating content well. I want to switch now. I want to show you a couple other different types of sites for those who may be a little more image focused. So here's one for Starbucks. And what Starbucks does well, this is their Instagram channel, is it's user generated. So they're getting their users to participate, which is a really smart strategy because it can take some of the burden off of them. And then also, if somebody's content or pictures are on there, they might share it on their channels, and that's how it can go viral, kind of multiply. One thing I want to note here is you see what, there are these random random pictures of somebody with a salad or a book or whatever. What they do is they make the drink part of the story. So on the top right, you'll notice there's a journal or a book there with a coffee cup. So it's kind of giving the image of people relaxing with their, with their coffee. The bottom right, of course, you can see is somebody standing outside. They have their drink. So their key is they're not just, because nobody's going to come to this if it's just a bunch of pictures of coffee cups. And they have, over 5.6 million followers. So what they do is, again, they make it part of the story. Another image-based one I want to show you that's doing it well is Target. And Target this is their Pinterest, and they do a variety of products. So they're getting people the dorm back to school, the babies, just the things, pins you love, the things that are popular. And that's a great way too if you are image focused. If you have something like this and you see what people are, repinning or liking or sharing, we'll talk about metrics, but see what content people are engaging with out there. And this next question, just curious if anyone else knows of a site that does a great job with images. So just one or two comments on there. If somebody like Starbucks or Target, you've noticed they've really caught your eye with images. Just curious if anyone else has suggestions. No, okay. I don't see anything coming in, and that's okay because that's kind of a tricky one because I think we all are thinking often in terms of when we think about copywriting, we just think about our words, and pictures are important, whether it's an image-based site or one of the other sites out there. Okay, so next I want to talk about some of the mistakes that we make. So there are definitely mistakes to be made in our copywriting and our content, and we're going to make them, and it's not a crisis, but what are some ways that we can avoid that? The first one, and I've addressed this somewhat, is making it about you. Again, like when I'll point the finger to myself. nobody cares what I'm certified in. They want to know what results they're going to get with their AdWords account or their, or something else. So really it's about them. So and when you think about, when you're talking about it, you don't want to make things about you that are somewhat generic, like we offer excellent service. Well, you should offer excellent service, and that should be implicit in doing business. But you really want to do more about them. And if you're going to say you're great, a great way to say you're great is through customer testimonials. So they're going to be more believable than maybe what you put out through, your executive official postings. Okay, another one is lots of jargon. So you want to be careful with this, and this is something that you'll probably catch as you're doing your keyword research. You're seeing, you might start doing some of your research and realize you're using jargony words. So I'll give you an example from my industry is when I talk about SEO and PPC, right? So SEO, I mentioned at the beginning, is search engine optimization, and PPC is paid per click. So a lot of people I've talked with don't understand those terms. They know there's things going out there in the marketing world, but those are two that they're not familiar with. So what I have to be careful of when I say SEO, and even when I say search engine optimization, people say, I don't know what search engine optimization is. I break it down even further, and I say, well, the SEO, that's organic, and it's about the traffic that you do not pay for to get listed. There's time and effort involved to get your content out there, but you can't pay for the ranking. So that's where I'm saying, talk about the jargon. So, and again, both of those 2 points, your clients don't care about search engine optimization. They just want to be page one in the search results. So be careful with about you and about using too much jargon. The other one, doing everything manually. I have a word of caution there. Is what I've seen some people do is they're on every single social media channel out there, and they use everything. They post everything with Hootsuite. And now that's an automatic thing that I tell people not to do, because then you're putting the same message on your 5 different channels at the same time. And when it's a little too automated, it indicates to people that maybe you're not that interested in them interacting with what you put out there. So I would say it's okay to do some automatic tools. You don't want to do everything manually. If you have a really good blog post and there's some nice maybe one-liners in there that could be used for Twitter or something lighthearted that you can use on Facebook, you can schedule that out, during the week or the month. So you don't want to do everything manually, but you don't want to be so automated that it's clear that you're not really there. So sharing content one time. This is another mistake. Now, I don't think you should blast the same thing out 5 days a week, but if you're in a place where you're saying, we've got to get some more writing, we've got to get stuff out there, it's got to be interesting, a good place to start is to look at the content that you've done in the past, so you can maybe do, like what I suggested is scheduling out some things in advance through Hootsuite or, whatever channel, onto whatever channel of choice. You also could do, instead of just sharing it multiple times, you can look for ways to build on it. So you look at what you've done in the past and find ways to build on that. Then not measuring your conversions, and we will talk about that in a moment, but the conversions, this is where you ask yourself the so what question, right? Was this successful? Was this writing, content, marketing, whatever we put out there, was it successful in driving people to the site? Did people convert on the site? So it's great that you are beginning conversations with people off your site, so they're, engaging on social media, but ultimately your website is where you make the sale. So you want to drive people back to the website. And then again, I say this again with the title. Your title is going to be important. And again, if you look at Huffington Post and look at their different posts that they put out there, you'll see some pretty engaging titles. And then, of course, the SEO. You don't have to be an expert on this or follow every single, thing that Google puts out there about that it will affect your SEO rankings. But what you do want to consider, again, remember, be careful with it. You're not doing the keyword stuffing. You're not buying links trying to drive people to your content, or, that you're just putting junk out there just because you want to get content out there. You really want to make sure you're putting stuff out there that's quality. So the general writing tips, again, some of this pretty clear. It's longer content does seem to do a little bit better from what I've seen with some trends. But if you have words that, if you got too much in there, cut it down. be conversational. People, again, depending on your industry, they're probably not looking for something heavily research-based or like a scientific paper. Just conversational, keep it simple. Again, what should I do after I view your video or read your email letter? What is the next action? And then some of these other things, the benefits, the headlines, and then the bullet points is easy for people who just want to skim the content. So that's helpful too. And then one more thing before we go to testing is these are great resources for free images. Now the images, even if you're not image-based like I showed you with Starbucks or Target, you want to include images when you are writing because that is what that keeps people engaged. So let me start with, I'll open up one of these. And you have to be careful with which images you're using because you could have a situation where you're using something that is copyrighted content. And then if that happens, somebody can come after you for that. And it looks like my internet connection is going to go a little slow. So let me just tell you what's here in case that screen's not going to open. So these are images, again, they are free. They are going to have some that you can buy, that you can upgrade. Sorry about that. That's something with one of my URLs. But so again, sorry for that error there. I'll explain what's here and then just tell you how to use them. So you go to these sites. Again, you'll have free images that you can search by a topic. I need pictures of people. I need a landscape. And you can use them without paying for them as long as you attribute it to the original source. So this Pixabay, I Am Creator, and free images are a few that if you don't have it. Now a lot of businesses have a subscription to stock photography, but they're, so they already are paying for something. But if you're on a budget, you don't want to have to pay for photos. These are ones that you might want to try out. The other one I'll show you is for Google. When you're just doing a basic Google search, is you can say, let's go to, I'll stick with the restaurant theme. So that's a bad search, restaurant. But what I want you to see is that when you do search on restaurant and then you click images, this is when you can get some of those images on Google. Again, you have to be very careful because you want to make sure that you understand the usage rights. So as you'll see here, that some of these maybe are requiring modification or you can use it only for non-commercial use. So be careful when you're pulling your images from Google. One of the other ones I'll just pull straight up here was the freeimages.com. And again, do a keyword, I'll just say women. We'll see if it'll do like a group of women. And then, so you've got some different images that you can pull from, whether you want something lighthearted or serious. But so just the point is, that they are, of course, going to try to sell you some files, but you do have some free files there too. So whichever source you use for your images, just again, include them in your writing and make sure that you have the rights to use them so you don't get in trouble later on. Okay, so now let's talk about the testing. So the testing, and again, another question I just want to pose to see if anybody is doing that. Before I give some ideas, I want to know if anybody is doing any kind of testing on your content. Is there anything you test, or do you just put it out there and kind of see what sticks? Yeah, so testing titles. Yeah, and with something I'll say with testing titles is in subject lines. Yep, email headline. So those are great examples, especially because when you're doing like an email newsletter, you could send one group the email with one title, and then the second half of your email group, you can change the title. So they would have the exact same content, but because the title is different, you can see if they are, engaged, if the engagement rates vary. Yep, so keywords. Yeah, so titles, and titles that's a huge one, your subject lines. Here's some other ideas. So your testing, of course, I've said that a million times, is those headlines, the topics. If you're not sure what's really going to ring with people, what's going to resonate with them, you're going to try different topics. The calls to action, you could ask them to do the same thing, but you can word it differently. Like maybe learn more and sign up, take people to the same page, but you can do some what's called A/B or split testing to see which resonates more. So maybe when people see sign up, that's not an action they want to take because that sounds like more of a commitment, whereas learn more is a little bit of a softer ask, that you don't have, there maybe more people are going to click on that. Again, that's not necessarily the case, just that's something that you might want to test. Of course, you have the design of the newsletter. See, I have that on there twice. So obviously that must be very important. Again, the types, nobody's going to our Facebook page, but everyone's on our YouTube channel. So that whether it's a video or written or long blog posts, and then, frequency, just kind of seeing what resonates with people. This one I think is interesting. If anyone has ever heard of a clause test, what this does is you remove words from a portion of text and see if people can identify the missing words. Now, it sounds like a little off the wall, but the reason I do this is if you're back there at stage one at the mission, our audience, topic, and the problem we're going to solve, and you're sitting with your team and you're having trouble defining that, the way this works is you would have a paragraph of text and just remove every fifth word or so, that can vary, and ask people to think about the context and what they know to see if they can see what was deleted. So again, that's just another thing that might be helpful. I pointed out for people who are saying, we're just struggling here of defining, we all think about our audience differently, or we don't even think about our service in the same terms. So this is just a little test you can do in-house to see whether or not your content seems to resonate. Okay, so now let's talk about measurement. So you have, we've talked about your audience and your content. We talked about that there's different types of channels, editorial calendars, and so there's a lot of information to go back through. And then the next thing is I'll talk about some of the different things that you might want to measure. And I am curious, is anyone actively measuring their content now? Curious if what that looks like for you, if that's just if you're looking at a number or an action, or just what are you measuring when it comes to your content? Yeah, clicks, views, that's a good one. I see clicks on socials too. So, are people clicking on your social channels? Length of time on page, opens, Twitter metrics, conversions from content. Yeah, these are exactly. You guys are right on task with those, the different things that you measure. Here's a few other ones, and I'm going to walk through, some specific details about these. So you have your social shares. So I see somebody that did say something about social. Are a lot of people reading your content and they're sharing that on Facebook? Somebody else mentioned page views, just kind of a general raw number. Are we getting a lot of eyeballs on this? Comments, and again, the real comments, not the, hey, great post, check out my spammysite.com, but the solid posts. The referral traffic lets you know if you are having some luck with your links. So if you've had some partnerships or somebody that really likes you and they're linking back to your site, this is where you can see that as you look at the referral. And of course, I'm going to refer to analytics because I talk about that quite a bit. Somebody else had already mentioned the time on site. Are they on your site for 2 seconds, or do they spend some time on there? Are they looking at posts for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, which is a lifetime on the internet? The pages per visit is about the depth. So it's not uncommon with a blog site, or even like what I showed you with Huffington Post, that people just go to the post, that they're interested in and they leave. But ideally, you'll have your content will be so engaging that they'll want to read you may also be interested in. So they'll want to look at a post that's, relevant to the one that they just read, or they're just going to poke around your site because they think it's so interesting. And then your pages per visit, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, however many pages. Of course, lead generation, that's if you're a service business, you're not selling a product on there. And then, of course, for direct sales, if you do have e-commerce. So I want to break down a few of these metrics, and I am, of course, going to be talking about these in Google Analytics. I happen to be a big fan of that tool, of course, because it's free. One thing I always want to say when I do talk about Google Analytics to people, if you don't have it on your site, and I find that quite a bit, people have not quite installed that yet, and you're thinking, we've got too much going on right now, I don't have time to deal with Google Analytics, I really strongly encourage you to go ahead and set it up, because what it does is the day you set it up is the day it starts collecting data. You can't go back in time or go retroactive and get that data at a later date. So even if we don't even have time to look at the account, if you can at least make that step to get it installed, then when you are ready, it will have been collecting data. The other warning I give, or just suggestion when I'm talking to people about analytics, is if you have it set up and you haven't looked at it in a while, log in and make sure it's working. And this is, I tell the same story I've seen different horror stories, but one person had, an event happening in May. And they said, well, you know what, leading up to that, we want to see what was happening in May of last year leading up to the event. So we want to look back a year. I log into their Google Analytics account and it's a flat line. There's no data. It was never working. So it's working now, and they can see how they did with that event, but they lost that ability to compare their metrics. So again, if you think you have Google Analytics installed and you haven't looked at it in a while or ever, log in and just make sure that data is still collecting. Okay, so let's move on to some specific metrics here in our remaining time. Geography. So this, in a Google Analytics screen on the left, you're going to look at audience, geo, and location. So this tells you where your readers are. So knowing where your content is being read, where these people are, can kind of help you understand your market. So what you can do is see if they're coming from a certain part of the country. I'll talk about that in a minute, United States, or even outside of the country. You can see a few here. So if a lot of people are reading your content out of the area that you thought was your market, you might see some new markets open up that you think, oh, you know what, maybe there is something for us there because we're attracting readers who are interested in what we're putting out there. And again, since this is not a Google Analytics talk, I'm not going to go into details here or share any screens today. But what I do want to point out is where you see United States. Anytime you see something hyperlinked like that, it indicates that you can click into it and drill down a little bit further. So if you clicked on United States, you would then be in a screen where you would see all of the states, right? So I live in South Carolina, so I'm going to say I drill in the United States and I see South Carolina, which is where I would expect most of my readers to be. When I click on South Carolina, then I'm drilling down even further into the cities. So you can start slicing and dicing this, seeing where your readers are coming from and seeing which content they're absorbing on your site. So that's the geography piece. Where do your readers live? The next one, time, and somebody addressed that. So one thing I look at is if you're putting a 1,000-word piece of content on there and you find that readers are only spending 3 seconds on it, it's possible that for your readership, you might want to consider some shorter pieces on your website, or if you have these really long articles, put it out in maybe a series of 5 200-word, part 1, part 2. But so that you can just look at over time, are people really, are they just not getting into these 1,000-word pieces, and maybe we need to put our efforts elsewhere. But if you find that they are spending a more significant amount of time on a few pieces, and it seems like they're probably a little more engaged. So here you can look at the historical information and see what type of content results in more time for people. And a question that I get a lot, people are going to say, what's a good amount of time, or what's a good bounce rate, or what's a good page depth? Really the best metric is your own site. So if suddenly, we see here in this sample, the top right shows an average time on the page a little over 3 minutes. If on average people were only spending 30 seconds, well then this is great. If they're reading more of our content, they love what we're writing. But if people had been spending 10 minutes and now they're doing 3 minutes, that's a problem. So as you collect your data, look at your data over time to determine, what's good or what's not so good. And so again, if you have analytics that's been set up, look at that data. If it's not set up, again, start collecting it now so you'll have it so that you can read, historically see how you've been doing. The other one's social sharing. What I want to say about social sharing is that the sharing is really more meaningful than liking. So if I like your content, I'm telling you that I like your content, right? So that's information that you have. But if I share, then that's how I want other people to know that I like it. So when you got to get people to share, because that's going to make it, more viral. It's going to get your content out there more. So make it easy for people to share your content. So I've, again, 2 tools here that I want to point out. Again, I have no vested interest in this. The one on the left is Add This, and that's just a little widget that people can share their content with their network. So if you look at the screen, envision this at the bottom of somebody's post, and you'll see this in email marketing too. I could share it to Facebook, share it to Twitter, I could email it to someone. So this is something, if you don't have it, if you're not using it on your site and you're putting a lot of content there, or you're writing for your newsletter, you want to make sure it's there as well. Excuse me. So that's Add This. So that's just a little free button where you can start to see if stuff is being shared. The one over to the right, it does exactly what it's saying. So it's letting you track sharing metrics across different efforts. So you're seeing your shares, your likes, your tweets based on the URL. So that's another way, if you want to just take a quick look on how your content is doing, then go ahead and find a URL that you've shared. Go ahead and just put it into this URL, or even just put your home page in there. And again, depending on your industry, you can see if people are talking about you at all. So again, that's social sharing, and that's Add This and shared count. The next one, inbound links. So at the very beginning, I said be careful with those inbound links, that you're not buying them. That was where Google was penalizing some sites that were, buying them or getting sites from junky websites to get links from them. But the inbound links, you can see that in Google Analytics. What I'm taking you to now right here, this is the Search Console screen. So this is Search Console, or what was called Webmaster Tools. And both Search Console and Google Analytics will show links to your website. And if people are linking to you, the assumption is that you probably have good content if they're linking to your content from their pages. But it's also a good idea to see what people are saying. So if you see a specific link to a piece of content you have, take the time to look out and see if it's hey, check out this post, it's really great about such and such, or if they're being critical of you. And either option is really okay as long as you're responding to it. It's just good to know when you are getting linked to what people are saying with those links. And then, of course, conversions. So with conversions, if you are, again, a service business, you will have conversions will be things like a sign up, a downloading a page, requesting more information, whereas with a revenue, you're looking at a dollar amount. So with the one thing I want to say about tracking those non-e-commerce conversions, if you have a page where it's a contact us form, and they come and they visit that contact us form page, that's not really a conversion. What you would want to track is when they fill out the confirmation, or they fill out that form and they click submit, and then it says form completed, or whatever, if that URL changes. That's actually what you would want to track, is that they filled out that form, because just visiting the form, of course, doesn't get them closer to being a customer, but once they complete it, that's what gets them closer to it. And again, are they viewing your paper, or are they downloading it? Or are they, so again, with a service business, it's really important to think about your content with your articles or white papers, and think about that in terms of, if you can't get people to fill out your lead generation form because they're not that far in the process yet, ideally it's engaging enough that they're willing to give your email, that they are willing to give you their email address. Also, when you are looking at your conversions, if you are looking at those softer non-e-commerce conversions, this is where you want to see, where are they coming from? So the people who are converting, were they looking at this week's white paper and they went ahead and converted? Or were you able to use your blog posts from last month and you recycled that on social media channels? That tells you what is driving those conversions. So what type of content, where that content's coming from. So look at what it is that gets people closer to becoming customers. And then before we go to the Q&A, just a few kind of final takeaways. If you're not sure where to start, is auditing it. So going back and saying, you know what, let's just take a look at what we're doing. You know, are we just haphazardly posting stuff on Twitter? Are we blogging every week and no one's reading what's out there? You know, so doing some auditing just to see what people have been responding to, what you've been putting out there. Keep remembering customer focused, and it's hard for everyone to do. And I'll point finger at myself again and say, well, I provide marketing services or I provide Google Analytics consulting, and that's not really all that important. So again, what would people get as a result of your service? Making sure it fits the channel. So if you have a really, a funny video or a cat video or something silly, you might not want to put that on LinkedIn. Since that's more of a professional network, you would think that would be where you would save it for Facebook. So make sure the content fits the channel. And I say over and over again to reuse it. That's why it's great if you can keep an editorial calendar. You can say, you know what, we didn't use this post we did 3 months ago as a topic that's becoming relevant again. Let's see if we can reuse it. Maybe we can add a part 2. Maybe we can just pull some pieces from it and put it out there. Of course, the testing. The one thing I would really encourage people to test, and I like to do this a lot with email marketing, is to test the headline. And a number of you said that that's something you're already doing, which is great, is which one resonates with people more than the other. Also, another thing for testing I want to mention is thinking about your headlines, what you're learning in your paid account that you can carry over to your organic. Now, if you don't have paid search, it might be something that you want to play around with a little bit. Sometimes I tell people to think of it like a market research budget that you can put into your maybe an AdWords account. But when you're creating ads in AdWords, you can have 2 ads running at the same time. And that's another way to test headlines, is even though it's in a different context, it's in a paid setting, you're still learning which headlines resonate with people. So that's something you can do in your paid account and maybe carry that over to your organic. When you're doing an email newsletter or doing an article, use that information there. And then, of course, the measure, Google Analytics, and again, you may have another tool, but regardless of your tool, there's so much information in there that it's very easy to get bogged down and to just spit out a bunch of different numbers. So that's, think about what matters in terms of measurement. So I gave the example of somebody filling out that lead generation form. The fact that they got to the form is a nice start. They're on the page where the form is located. But if they're not completing it, then that's not really of much use to you. You want to make sure that they are actually completing the form, and then that's what you would measure. So I know it's a lot of information. You can do this a piece at a time, so it's a little bit more manageable. And now that we're at the 75-minute mark, we're going to go ahead and turn this over to any questions that might have come in.
Okay, thank you, Tina. I would now like to take your questions. To ask a question, select the Q&A pod in the lower left corner of your screen. Then type and send your question. Please phrase your question directly and as briefly as possible. Okay, our first question. Do you have any tips on crafting a call to action to get visitors to convert?
That's a great question, because that's a challenge for a number of people. And I think the lowest level of commitment that's still worth it to you is the one to do, like the example of learn more or sign up. If I click on learn more, I'm probably going to go to a page and maybe it's going to have, a chart or about your product or maybe different use cases. So I'm just learning more. If I see sign up, that I may, and again, depending how careful you are about your information, I may think, now I'm going to get on the email list and I'll get email every single day, or I'm going to have to sign up and actually set up a username and a password and go get my credit card. And so I would say doing more of a softer ask would make people more likely to convert. So that's a great question.
Okay, super. Our next question. What's your take on posting the same story in different ways on different platforms, such as LinkedIn versus your website blog? Do you have any tips to keep this interesting?
Oh, that's another good one. So if you are doing I'm trying to see if I can think of an example. Like let's say I did a blog post and it was a pretty lengthy post on reporting in Google Analytics or something, 600, 700, 800 words. Maybe what I would probably do is I would maybe find like a one-liner out of there. The one analytics report you've got to use is the XYZ, and I might use that on Twitter. And then I might have another one about, maybe on LinkedIn I'll say, hey, these are the top 3 findings on analytics. So I'm just kind of throwing stuff out of the air here. But what you're doing is I think if you're making sure to kind of keep this different and keep this somewhat interesting, is when you're posting it in different places. If you are posting it in different places with different headlines, or you're making sure that if you have a 3-point blog, you don't take point 1 and put it on Facebook and LinkedIn, and Twitter and all those channels at the same time. What I like to do, what I did with one of my clients, is a 3-point blog. Then we would have point 1 on the blog. Maybe we would put that on Twitter on Tuesday, and then point 2, maybe we'll go ahead and put that on Facebook on Friday. So you're stretching out your content and pulling out different pieces of it that you want to display.
Okay, next question. What are some suggestions for writing copy with the goal of selling a product without seeming like we are pushing a product?
Yeah, that's ultimately we're all doing this because we're looking to make some money or get donations or find clients. If you think about the consumer, kind of that journey, and again, whether it's the journey I displayed or one that you find elsewhere, and you think about that beginning stages that are just getting interested, is you want to talk, and I'll use myself again as an example. So if somebody were to come to my site or one of my articles, they don't care about necessarily my experience or who I even am. They want to know, how do I get started with Google AdWords? So I can do a piece of content on how to get started with Google AdWords. I can say, the maybe 5, 6, 7 things that you must do. I don't even mention myself at all. And then maybe I can give a couple options. I can say, if you're struggling with this or it's not something you want to manage on your own, learn more about our services. Or at the end of it, it might say, sign up for our 5-week course, our free online course on Google AdWords, where you'll get a new message every Monday. And then what you're doing is, for those 5 Mondays, they're getting a message about using Google AdWords. And then maybe after number 5 is where you're doing that, kind of doing that ask. Great job, you completed the course. If you still need help, it could be something like, we're having an in-person session on Friday for training, or I'll be at this event, or, so create that ask after you've shown your experience, because then it demonstrates that you do have a skill set in that area.
All right, excellent. Next question. How does copywriting differ from our website compared to our marketing emails?
I think it's the same. The main thing I think is that it's the same tone. So if you're, you're in a more, I keep saying, like attorneys or financial planners in a more serious business, that you're going to have, your content is going to be more factual and, again, a little more serious. So you would want to do probably the same thing on your email. So it's to just remember that regardless of which channel you're using, sounds silly, but you're the same person, so you're the same type of content, the same type of company with the same type of content, and you just want to keep that in mind, so it doesn't look like your email came from somebody totally different than the person who wrote information on your website.
All right, next question. Are there any other tools besides Google Analytics and AdWords that we should be looking at?
I would say I do like, even though I mentioned Hootsuite to not just blast everything out there, I do think Hootsuite is a pretty good tool as far as sending information out and seeing some of your numbers. I would also spend some time looking at the tools with, in whatever solution you're using. So, of course, for Facebook, you look at Facebook Insights and start to see if people are they're only reading your posts that you put on Monday, or they're only sharing the posts that include a picture. And that's pretty common. I think you're going to find that your image-based Facebook posts get a little more traction. So if you look within that tool, you can get some of that information. With Twitter, I'm trying to remember what it's called. It might be called Twitter Analytics, if that is the term for it. It's going to show you how you did for the last month in terms of which stories were retweeted the most or which ones got the most views. So I think it's good for whatever kind of tool you're using to see what's happening there, especially with Facebook. If you get some demographic information, that's very helpful.
All right, great. Next question. Are there any specific words that we should avoid? I was told that some words sound spammy and hurt SEO results.
I think if you're doing something that's too generic, like click here because we're number one, or free, cheap, I think just in general, we're the best company ever for. So I think it's maybe not so much the word as it is the claims. If you're claiming to do something and you're not backing that up, that can come off as spammy. And then again, if you just find, and I'm sure you've seen content like this online, that you click on a search result and it's just, it's just a bunch of junk. You can tell they're just fitting words in there because they're trying to make money off the ads on the site. So I think that if you are writing in mind that I want to put out something quality that my audience is interested in and helps them solve a problem, then you should be okay with anything you put out there.
Okay. Next question. How effective do you think newsletters are for professional services? How often do you think you should send a company newsletter, and what kind of content should we stay away from?
Yeah, surprisingly, email newsletters are still, some people think, oh, well, email's dead because they're looking at social media now or text messaging and nobody reads their email anymore. But there actually are pretty good open rates. I think a company newsletter maybe once a month is good. I've actually been on an unsubscribe kick. I have some places that I've been getting messages from every day, and I just can't handle that, or too frequent. Another one that I've recently unsubscribed for too is that the type of content was the same. So it's not like it was bad content, but the person was saying the same thing with every email newsletter. So I was kind of done with that. So I think let's say if your company has 5 primary products, or primary use of this one's professional services, so you offer very specific services in these 3 areas. I would mix that up each month and try to find, if you can find something about your industry too that's new or that it's trending, that also sets you up as an expert. So if you're in a specific field and you're able to talk about what is happening in that field and some of the trends in that field, it just really sets you up as somebody who knows what you're talking about and that you can be trusted.
Great. Next question. Can you talk a little bit more about word density and long-tail keywords?
Yeah, so the word density, when you're writing so that's that keyword density that Google had hit before, when people are just putting a bunch of keywords in there, just trying to get ranked for it when it really wasn't very meaningful. So your keyword density, if you're having a long post and you're 150, 200 words in, like every couple hundred words, I would at least try to get it in there. So it's not magic. So don't look at your post and say, okay, we're at the 150 word mark, let's get the word in there. But it's really when you have an opportunity to include the keyword and it sounds natural, that's a good time to get it in there. And then the long tail keywords are the ones that are, so one example, right, restaurant, not a great keyword. In one of the searches that you saw me do here, I said vegan restaurant. Okay, that's a little bit better. Vegan restaurant, catering. So your long tails, you just keep adding searches. So a restaurant is too broad. You're not going to do great there. But then it's a vegan restaurant catering, vegan restaurant catering downtown, or we do kids' birthday parties, or anything about your restaurant that's maybe a little bit different that would make you stand out. That would be more of a long tail keyword.
great. Next question. Are there certain times to release new content? Is it beginning of the month, end, middle?
That varies quite a bit too, and that's another thing I tell people to test. I happen to use with my email newsletters, I use MailChimp, and with MailChimp, and this might be with other products too, I'll get this prompt. It'll say if I'm going to schedule, it'll say let MailChimp determine the optimal time. So you might have that with your tool, that it'll kind of figure out the optimal times. I think Monday mornings are pretty much are not a great one because people have so much other stuff to deal with in their inbox. I generally wouldn't do that. I think a Friday afternoon can be good if it's something lighthearted. If people have kind of mentally checked out a little bit, that's where you might be able to get some of those, those fun posts or a cartoon or something, as long as it still fits within your brand framework overall. But I would just be careful about what you're doing on Mondays and Fridays. And again, track when you're doing your email newsletter, look at the, kind of the open rate and see what the response was, and then you can base it on that.
Okay, great. That was the last question. If you did not have an opportunity to ask your question, please email your question to jmurphy, that's JMURPHY, at pbp.com. That's jmurphy at pbp.com, and your conference producer will be glad to respond. I'll now turn it back to you, Tina, for some closing remarks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, just to wrap up, again, I say I know this is a lot of different information, but if you think about some of those tips at the end where you're auditing your content, you're thinking about who your audience is, you're kind of planning ahead so you can make the most of your writing for the month, it can be a little less painful. So I would say, just do this a little bit at a time and don't try to get everything up to speed immediately.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Progressive Business Conferences would like to thank you for attending today's webinar. We would like to give some closing information, which is also listed on your dial-in instruction sheets. If you would like to purchase a recording of this conference, you may do so by calling 800-964-6033 or by using the enclosed order form. And again, we encourage you to complete and return the evaluation form to us. On behalf of Progressive Business Conferences, I would like to thank you for attending the webinar. This concludes our program.